It's been a few weeks now since Star Wars Celebration occurred in London. Quite a few announcements were made about Star Wars projects. Kathleen Kennedy announced the first movie to come out since Rise of Skywalker in 2019. That movie revolves around Rey. Since the announcement of this project, there has been a lot of discussion whether or not this is a good idea. Some very interesting info also came out recently regarding the movie's original writer, Damon Lindelof. So in today's video, I want to talk about what we know so far about the Rey movie, the Damon Lindelof situation, and the overall difficulty Disney/Lucasfilm will have with trying to build up hype for this movie and convincing some people to even give it a chance. So here's what we know about the movie so far. It's an untitled movie directed by Obaid-Chinoy, known recently for her work with Ms. Marvel and known for her activism work in films that highlight gender inequality. Stephen Knight is writing the script. Knight is the creator of Peaky Blinders, and he also replaced Damon Lindelof as the writer for the project. I'll get into those details shortly. We don't know much about the movie, but there are a few details I could speak of so far. Daisy Ridley will of course return as Rey, who will be the main character. The movie will take place about 15 years after the Rise of Skywalker, and Kathleen Kennedy describes it as post-First Order, Rise of the New Jedi Order. Episode 9 ended off with Rey making a commitment to Luke Skywalker that she would rebuild the Jedi Order. So that's all we really know right now in terms of when this movie takes place and what the premise will be. Some new information came out recently about some stuff though behind the scenes. Damon Lindelof was the original writer for this movie. Lindelof is best known as the creator and showrunner of numerous television series such as Lost, The Leftovers, and HBO's Watchmen. Lindelof was apparently working on this movie for months. The Hollywood Reporter came out with an article last October talking about the project. Lindelof was in the midst of creating a script along with co-writer Justin Britt Gibson. They were removed from the film back in February. Despite being ousted from the film, Lindelof seems to be in good spirits and maintains interest in working in Star Wars again. I'll read a couple of quotes. "I wish them all the best of luck. Obaid-Chinoy is an incredible director, and I can't wait to see what she comes up with. Will I get back in line outside the club and try to get back in again? Absolutely. If at first you don't succeed, try and try again, or again, try, as Yoda would say." Now, it's pretty cool to see that Lindelof is still in good spirits. I'm sure he's disappointed, but with how upbeat he sounds, maybe they have plans for him to work on something else down the road. Now, his version of a Rey movie was going to be very different from what's currently being worked on. In Lindelof's version of the movie, he was going to focus on an elderly Rey. The movie was going to take place 60 years after Episode 9, and Rey would be training 2 Jedi, 1 male and 1 female. The biggest detail of all this info is that Daisy Ridley was not going to return as Rey. Lindelof's ideal casting choice for the role was supposedly Helen Mirren. She was never in talks for the role, but she was considered the prototype for what Lindelof was looking for. The chances of Finn returning seem slim in this story as well, because there's still speculation that Finn and maybe even Poe return in this current version of the film. We shall see about that. So it appears Lindelof had the goal of Rey passing the torch to some younger Jedi who could possibly become future leads in the franchise. Lastly, there is no confirmed release date for this movie to hit theaters, but speculation remains for a 2025 release still. There are so many possibilities on how they could tell a story of Rey in the future. Endless possibilities should generate endless hype, right? Especially since this will be the first Star Wars film hitting the big screen since 2019. Unfortunately, no matter what they do, this movie will always receive hate and miss out on a chunk of Star Wars fans watching it. Now, I plan on watching the movie. I'm not all for continuing sequel trilogy stuff, but I would rather see this standalone film compared to a trilogy set after the sequel trilogy. And regardless of all the BS that comes and goes with this franchise, especially of late, I'm still a big Star Wars fan. I love the franchise. I'm gonna keep consuming it. I do want this movie to keep some distance away from the Skywalker saga because the sequel trilogy was a huge flop. There were many things done wrong in episodes 7, 8, and 9, but the main protagonist not being written well is one of the biggest mistakes, and now Lucasfilm wants to continue making content about her? Yeah, this may not go well. I just watched Return of the Jedi in theaters for the 40th anniversary of the film, and let me tell you, that was a great experience. I smiled, I laughed, but I also felt frustrated at times. The character growth Luke went through in that trilogy made sense, and it was satisfying at the end to see when he matured and became a Jedi Knight and ultimately saved the day. So, I got mad at times when thinking about how they wrote him in the sequel trilogy, and Rey was written to automatically be powerful and basically defeat anyone. Rey's character development is vastly different in comparison to Luke's, and not in a good way. And I got mad again at the end of the movie when Vader saves Luke from the Emperor. Episode 9's somehow Palpatine returned idea really soured one of the greatest moments in the franchise, and I know I'm not the only one who feels this way. Rey's character development is just not really satisfying, and her journey throughout the sequel trilogy never felt earned. Like, we spend 2 movies claiming she's a nobody, and then she's conveniently written in as the granddaughter of Palpatine who somehow returned. Rey also is just an automatic Jedi Knight in terms of skill and power level. I don't have an issue with Rey knowing how to fight because, well, she was a loner and a scavenger who had to look out for herself. But being able to kick Kylo Ren's ass right away in Episode 7 was ridiculous. Like, you have to look back at the lack of logic in this writing. Kylo Ren was trained by both Luke and Snoke, who is technically Palpatine. How does he not beat her, especially in Episode 7 during their first fight? And I'm not going to go down the path of saying she's a Mary Sue and all that, but I do understand and agree with the people who are very critical of her abilities early on in the trilogy. Rey never honestly went through a struggle like Luke and Anakin. Rey trying to figure out who she really was is quite an emotional part of the story, and really the best part of her story and development, even though the writing wasn't that good. Rey's most memorable quote came in Episode 8 when she said this to Kylo: "I need someone to show me my place in all this." I felt that. That was a good quote, but the writing goes on to make her a Palpatine and things go downhill again. Then she gets Force lightning abilities out of nowhere in the 9th movie, and they just wrote things, it seemed like, to make the audience go, "Wow, look at that." But later, when you think logically about all this, you realize it makes no sense. Rey hardly earned anything in the sequel trilogy, and it's a shame because they just did not do the character justice with the way everything was written for her. And I have nothing against Daisy Ridley. I've said this time and time again, and I'll say it again here in this video. I have no issues with any of the actors from that trilogy. And in regards to focusing on Daisy here, I thought she played the role extremely well. She just had to do what was written on that script, and that stuff stunk. I would love to see this movie be a hit because I want Daisy to have some kind of Star Wars success. I want her to be celebrated and praised for something in this franchise. I want her to go out on top, especially if this is the last bit of Star Wars work she does. But again, look back at that sequel trilogy. She converted Kylo Ren back to the good side. She became a Jedi. She defeated Palpatine and stopped the First and Final Order. And at the end, she claimed to be a Skywalker. She, did a lot? She has a lot of great accomplishments of high magnitude. So then why does she need another movie? It seems like she is already a complete character. I don't think there's anything else she could do to top what she did in the sequels. I'm not trying to be a hater, I'm just trying to be real. And before anyone goes after me in the comments, I'm not saying I love how they wrote all this stuff and everything she accomplished. I know people are going to critique the way she did all these things, and I get that. I'm with you. I'm just speaking here. I'm not defending it or anything. Now, I want to get back to talking about writers and directors. Many are worried that Charmin Obaid-Chinoy is going to do activism work in this movie. A lot of people will revolt if there's any type of girl power, feminine stuff in this movie. I could already picture and see all the YouTube videos that are going to come out about it. And honestly, I'm not trying to go down that rabbit hole. I'm just pointing out the comments that are already out there and just letting you know what I'm seeing, which I'm sure you're seeing too. I personally just hope that they write a good story that makes logical sense. That's all I'm asking for. And I'll just say one thing in regards to the whole female protagonist discussion in Star Wars. We've had some great female characters in the history of this franchise. We've had the late and great Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia, who recently just got her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Absolutely well deserved. I only wish she was here to be able to celebrate it herself. And we've also had other characters down the line: Padme, Jyn Erso, Ahsoka, Bo-Katan, and Hera Syndulla, both live action and animated female characters that have been awesome in Star Wars. So I would hope this movie truly focuses on adding more to Rey's character. Good storytelling and logical writing is key, at least for me. And I love Peaky Blinders. That's a Netflix show I always recommend to people. Stephen Knight created a masterpiece of a show. His character development for Thomas Shelby and many of the other characters is fantastic. It gets deep too. It is a very serious show with a lot of dark tones and a lot of personal struggles within the characters. Now, I doubt Disney will let him get that serious with Rey's character, but honestly, it would be kind of cool to see some sort of personal inner struggle with herself. You know, she's the granddaughter of Palpatine, right? Her blood should be running strong with the dark side. Perhaps she is still haunted by Palpatine. Maybe she still struggles with dark side traits that are within her that she's still 15 years later trying to overcome. Or I'll even give you an interesting idea here. Finn never got to tell Rey that he is Force sensitive. What if she never got to train him and he was killed by a dark side user? We get a flashback of this, and this is what ends up haunting and upsetting Rey in this movie. You know, this movie just can't give Rey everything through writing like it did in the sequels, so there's got to be some kind of struggle for her. And Stephen Knight might just be the man for the job if they truly want to focus on Rey and give her some kind of a struggle 15 years down the line. And for the last thing I want to bring up, and it's about Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm. I am glad Damon Lindelof is acting very professional and humble about his ousting from this project, because honestly, this could have been bad publicity for Lucasfilm and yet another L for them. And I truly think it is, though, just not as bad. You know, you're seeing it all over. Many content creators are talking about this situation and continue to pump out the criticism of Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm. You know, you have all these other media outlets that are getting quotes from Damon about what happened. And say what you want about Kathleen Kennedy, she's woke, liberal, blah, 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 blah. I really don't care about that stuff. I don't even want to get involved. I don't want to step foot on that toxic battlefield of this fandom that is just wild with everything they say. I really don't care about that stuff, like I said. What my concern is how is she handling the business side of things at Lucasfilm? And I don't think it's a good look to keep changing your mind about projects and playing musical chairs in regards to who's making these projects. Let me give you a history of all the decisions that have been made behind the scenes that could be considered controversial. In 2016, Gareth Edwards was the original director of Rogue One. He ended up getting replaced by Tony Gilroy. Gareth retained his directing credit, but reshoots happened as a result of the change. In 2017, Kathleen Kennedy fires Colin Trevorrow, who was the original script writer for Episode 9. Go Google what his script consisted of, and I bet you will be mad that they ended up going along with JJ's plan. 2018, she fires the directors of the Han Solo movie due to creative differences. They already shot most of the principal photography at this point. 2019, the executive producers of Game of Thrones walked away from a series of Star Wars films they were set to write and produce. They signed a deal with Netflix. How do you let those guys walk away? And a couple of other miscellaneous things. We're still waiting for the Taika Waititi movie that's not even written yet. Patty Jenkins' Rogue Squadron was canned. A Lando show with Donald Glover continues to be talked about, but it's like, where's the relevance of a Lando show, especially over time as it's diminishing as we get more and more years away from when Donald Glover was Lando in the Han Solo movie. And then Kevin Feige was considered to get a project, and that consideration has gone away. And I tell you what, after the great work he did with Marvel for the last decade plus, I would have loved to have seen him give his take on the Star Wars universe. So my point is that Star Wars continues to struggle to get back on track with good content and projects as a whole. It doesn't look good for a company that has a lengthy list of situations where they fire people, switch people around, cancel projects with great potential, lag behind in the creation of projects, and also allowing other companies to outbid them for the services of successful writers. All this makes Lucasfilm look bad in the industry. And in my opinion, this is the true criticism that needs to be talked about when talking about Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm. And honestly, I'm not here trying to trash the Rey movie. I'm just trying to have an overall discussion of, hey, if this is your first Star Wars movie to come out since the sequel trilogy, this is a big risk. You're really playing risky here. You're putting all your money in the middle of the poker table, and it's really going to be interesting to see how they do this. Well, I would love to read your opinions on these topics down below. Let me know what you think. And as always, like and share the video, subscribe for more. You can follow me on Twitter and TikTok at analyzethis_YT. Also, if you want to see more of my Star Wars opinions and content, click the link on the top right of your screen. Thanks for watching.